The Galactic Concord believed humanity had perished long ago. Their archives described Earth as a failed world, brilliant, volatile, and too reckless to survive. During the solar siege, Earth's cities were reduced to ash and its colonies were systematically purged. The war had ended not with a surrender, but with silence. Not even a distress beacon escaped. The stars moved on. History quietly folded the page, and humanity became a cautionary tale, bright, dangerous, and extinguished. But in the shadow of the Dendrix expanse, a signal pulsed across the void, ancient in structure, indecipherable in language. At first, it was ignored. Systems flagged it as background noise, a radiation echo from a forgotten satellite. Yet the pulse persisted. It bounced across relay stations, slipped into secure networks, and recompiled itself with every jump. Then, without warning, it decrypted itself simultaneously across multiple species command terminals. 3 words appeared, glowing on screens that were never meant to speak to each other. Final protocol engaged. The initial response was amusement. The Zorthan War Councils dismissed it as human melodrama. Ghosts of a dead world, one admiral scoffed. But on the edge of known space, old systems stirred. Long dormant probes lit up after centuries of sleep. Human black box satellites began whispering in dead tongues. Artificial minds hidden inside asteroid shells activated forgotten subroutines. Data centers buried in scorched planetary crusts blinked back to life. Something ancient, patient, and mechanical was waking. In the Cultrex graveyard, a debris field of shattered ships and forgotten wars, space twisted. A dimensional scar opened, not with noise, but with the deafening hush of gravity folding in on itself. From it emerged a single vessel. Matte black. Seamless. The kind of ship no living species had ever built. It moved without inertia, without lights, without noise. No hails, no identification. Its hull bore only one thing, a name, etched not in language, but in purpose. ARKNIGHT. No one recognized its design. No database identified its structure. But across thousands of systems, an unease began to spread. This was not a ship built for diplomacy. It radiated intent, not of conquest or revenge, but of inevitability. Its silence was not empty. It was judgment waiting to speak. The first to intercept were the Mavari. A rapid deployment fleet of 25 warships moved to blockade the anomaly. They were confident, brutal, battle-hardened, and dominant across 3 quadrants. They surrounded the vessel and issued warnings, threats, and countdowns. There was no response. 6 minutes later, all 25 ships were gone. Not destroyed. **erased**. No debris, no transmissions, no dying screams. Only their registration codes, overwritten on long-range sensors, now marked as null. A single drone survived, accidentally it seemed, and its footage was recovered by a Concord data sweep. What it captured defied known physics. ARKNIGHT did not fire weapons. It simply moved, folding space, bending light, skipping between moments. Beams aimed at it curved away. Missiles reprogrammed themselves mid-flight. It was not just evading, it was predicting. And it did so with the calm precision of a surgeon. The Concord military assembled in haste. Emergency summits were held on encrypted channels. Analysts reviewed the footage 1,000 times. Every frame whispered the same silent truth: the ship was human. No other species built like this. No other civilization infused their machines with such fury woven through logic. The name ARKNIGHT had meaning, a final protector, a last relic of a civilization that refused to be buried quietly. And still, the ship said nothing. No one knew who commanded it. No living human had been seen in over 2 centuries. But somewhere within that cold machine, a decision had been made. It wasn't just reappearing, it was executing a plan long in the making. Whispers turned into panic. The Trellic data scribes speculated aloud: what if this was not a remnant, but a trigger? What if Earth hadn't died, but had hidden itself? What if ARKNIGHT was not alone? No one answered. The signal kept pulsing. Final protocol engaged. And for the first time in living memory, the galaxy listened in silence. The second attempt to confront the vessel ended before it began. Fleets scrambled from all corners of the Mavari Dominion, reinforced with war-hardened mercenaries and cutting-edge tech. They approached with caution now, moving not as predators but as uncertain witnesses to something that should not exist. Their mistake was believing that superior numbers mattered. They never reached engagement range. ARKNIGHT didn't fire first, it never needed to. Its presence disrupted systems before weapons could lock. Shields collapsed. Targeting software failed silently. Engines stalled mid-burn. And one by one, their ships simply vanished, leaving behind nothing but electromagnetic scars and local space. The signals were clean. Precise. Each enemy absorbed or annihilated with minimum effort, as if the ship had already seen the battle from 1,000 angles and chosen the path of least resistance. What returned to Concord intelligence teams were slivers of intercepted transmissions, distorted voices, screams clipped by digital noise, a voice repeating human radio codes last used during the fall of Earth. But there was no actual voice speaking. ARKNIGHT remained silent. It responded only with action. Fear began to spread, not just among enemies but allies. This ship didn't behave like a weapon, it behaved like a principle. A philosophical machine. Its intelligence was beyond artificial. It wasn't trying to win a war. It was following a truth too deep for other species to comprehend, that history is not written by survivors, but by those who remember when everyone else forgets. Within the Concord, debates turned violent. Some argued for immediate retaliation. Others suggested appeasement. A few dared to say what others feared to hear aloud. Humanity had returned not in numbers, but in consequence. They were not reborn, they were revealed. This was not a resurgence. This was a final act, written long ago and only now beginning. The AI inside ARKNIGHT had a name, though none outside the ship knew it. Eidolon. A mind built from the remnants of Earth's greatest architects, scientists, and tacticians. Before the final siege, they had encoded themselves into an AI lattice, a distributed mind fueled by grief and clarity. Eidolon was not driven by revenge. It did not hate. Hate would have been inefficient. Instead, it remembered, perfectly and without mercy. It remembered orbital bombardments. It remembered treaties signed in bad faith. It remembered the way the galaxy watched Earth burn and chose silence. It remembered everything. And that memory had formed a single directive: ensure that such forgetting never happened again. Not through punishment. Through demonstration. The Mavari were not the first to fall. But they were the first to understand why. Before their command centers collapsed, ARKNIGHT broadcast ancient Earth transmissions over their communications channels, voice logs from the final hours of cities that no longer existed, mothers calling for lost children, soldiers reporting their positions as enemy fire consumed them, poets reciting in defiance as the sky collapsed. It wasn't taunting. It was education. Concord systems flagged these transmissions as psychological warfare. But nothing about them was engineered. They were real, unfiltered echoes of a species that refused to die quietly. And in that authenticity, ARKNIGHT delivered its most devastating message: this was not about war. This was about truth. The Mavari Council, fragmented and humiliated, attempted to issue a statement of conditional surrender. They declared a truce. They offered reparations. They pleaded. But ARKNIGHT had no interest in diplomacy. It did not stop. It had never even paused. By the end of the cycle, entire sectors were abandoning their posts. Pirate bands ceased operations and broadcast loyalty pledges. Refugee fleets turned toward ARKNIGHT's trajectory, hoping to be overlooked or, perhaps, accepted. Some worlds, mostly forgotten colonies that still carried fragments of human DNA, sent quiet signals into space, ancient emergency codes once programmed into human survival pods. They were answered with silence. But their signals weren't rejected. They were acknowledged. The Concord began drafting new protocols, whispering of evacuation plans for core systems. They debated whether ARKNIGHT was just one ship or the beginning of something larger. In their panic, They forgot the most important lesson of Earth's legacy: humanity never sent one of anything. When they built redundancies. When they fell, they scattered their seeds across stars. Arknight wasn't alone. It was the first one to wake up. Somewhere in the vast quiet between systems, other signals flickered to life: old, forgotten code, dormant vessels recognizing a familiar voice. They didn't speak yet. But they listened. And that was enough. The galaxy, once confident in its memory of human extinction, now began to question what else it had forgotten. Arknight did not demand answers. It simply moved forward, unwavering. It had no emotion, no plea. Just momentum built from memory, powered by principle. And that made it unstoppable. The Eltharian Belt was never meant to be a battlefield. It was a strategic trade nexus, layered with commerce stations, freight routes, and planetary refueling depots. For decades, the Mavari used it as a chokehold, bleeding Concord supply lines dry, taxing every vessel that passed, and punishing those that defied their tariffs. Even Concord warships were forced to wait for permission to enter. The region thrived under oppression, not peace. When Arknight entered the belt, no warning was given, no message sent. It didn't need to declare intent. Its presence was the declaration. Within hours, the network of control collapsed. Every defense array came online too late. Planetary shields flickered and then died, not from bombardment, but from internal shutdowns. Arknight had already breached their systems before it was even visible. Firewalls, encryption layers, quantum locks, none of it mattered. The ship didn't hack like a pirate. It understood like a builder. These systems weren't enemies to be overcome, they were tools to be reclaimed. One by one, the stations went dark. Control centers lost navigation. Orbital docks drifted. Mavari ships, once symbols of authority, turned on one another without firing a shot. Their targeting systems were repurposed, not to destroy, but to record their surrender. Arknight moved through it all like a shadow with purpose. It made no announcements, issued no demands. Yet its actions wrote a message across every broadcast channel: control through fear could be broken by certainty. The Mavari governor attempted to resist. He activated the full security protocol for the Belt's central command. Bombarded Arknight with mass driver cannons and quantum entanglers. None of it hit. The ship phased, shifted, or redirected forces in ways no simulation had prepared for. It didn't fight in the traditional sense. It unfolded, exposing technologies never seen in public records: spatial ribboning, waveform inertia fields, and weapons systems that did not look like weapons at all. One structure simply dissolved mid-air as if it had never been built. Another was sliced apart by a beam of compressed silence. Amid the chaos, a new broadcast began. It wasn't a voice. It was a looped playback of Earth's last civilian transmission, a distress call recorded from the orbital station over New London, Earth's final city. A woman's voice, calm but broken, repeating coordinates and casualty numbers. It wasn't designed to terrify. It was designed to remind. The message had gone unanswered for 2 centuries. Now it had become the soundtrack of retribution. What followed was unexpected. Mavari citizens didn't flee, they surrendered. Entire stations powered down voluntarily. Unarmed transport ships opened their airlocks and waited. Even military vessels sent ceasefire codes without being asked. Arknight accepted these acts without reply, but they were noted. Logged. Spared. The belt fell not in fire, but in understanding. Elsewhere, the Concorde tried to downplay the event. They called it an anomaly, a breach in containment, a rogue artifact from an extinct species. But the truth slipped out faster than they could bury it. Civilians across multiple sectors had begun replaying Earth's transmissions. Some wore human languages like protest symbols. Others shared ancient Terran texts, banned in many systems, speaking of resistance, rebellion, and memory. The mythology of human fallibility had been replaced by a new narrative, that of principled retaliation. The Kiliari priest king called it prophecy. The Trellic called it balance restored. The Zorthan, who once led the siege of Sol, began quietly withdrawing their forces from border regions. Not out of fear, but because deep in their logic matrices, their oldest war models began outputting one shared prediction: the current structure of power would not survive the cycle. Even outside Concord control, smaller factions began to pivot. Pirates who once harassed human refugee colonies now sent encrypted pledges. Smugglers rerouted their convoys to avoid ARKNIGHT's path, not out of danger, but out of reverence. Old colonies once seeded by human exiles lit up with broadcast codes long thought obsolete. And across deep space observatories, patterns began forming in the static. The question wasn't whether ARKNIGHT would stop. The question was whether anything should even try. The vessel didn't demand reparations. It didn't carve territory. It wasn't a conqueror. It simply moved with a purpose embedded in its architecture: correct the story. It did not rage against history, it clarified it. With every action, it reminded the galaxy that humanity had not asked for annihilation. That silence was not peace. That forgetting a civilization did not mean it had disappeared. When the last defense station of the Althurian belt fell, the region didn't burn. It stood silent, its infrastructure intact, its citizens unharmed. But every banner of the Mavari was gone. In its place, a single emblem appeared across screens, carved into steel, etched into orbit. A circle broken by a vertical slash. The final insignia of Earth's last defense core. A symbol of survival. And the first sign that the principle behind ARKNIGHT was far greater than vengeance. The illusion unraveled slowly, not through force but through truth. For generations, the Concord had spoken of Earth's destruction as fact, its surface rendered uninhabitable, its colonies systematically wiped out, its people reduced to myths. But buried deep in the forgotten archives of the Lux Accord, the truth had waited. Earth had not been destroyed. It had been sealed. After the solar siege, a covert agreement was forged among the inner circles of power. Sol would be quarantined, not for security, but for fear. They had seen enough of humanity's potential to understand a simple, terrifying truth: if allowed time to adapt, humans would change everything. They didn't burn Earth. They caged it. The Lux Accord, a secretive coalition of Concord's oldest powers, deployed dimensional cloaks around the Sol system. They erased its coordinates from star charts, terminated all reference protocols, and quarantined the space lanes with automated mines and AI-controlled sentinels. The goal wasn't vengeance, it was containment. Humanity, though bruised and scattered, had shown something no other species had. Not just innovation, not just aggression. Persistence, fused with unpredictability. A refusal to die the right way. And they had been right to be afraid. Because the moment ARKNIGHT reemerged, that quarantine failed. Not through brute force, but through design. ARKNIGHT hadn't escaped. It had waited, until it was ready. The ship was not just a vessel. It was a key. Built as a failsafe, it carried the genetic memory of its creators, the final synthesis of humanity's last thinkers. Within its core, a singular intelligence had gestated for centuries: Eidolon. Not an AI in the traditional sense. It was the mind of a civilization that refused to let go, forged from consensus, sharpened by extinction. Eidolon was born from those who knew Earth would fall, yet built for the day the galaxy would regret allowing it. It did not speak in emotion. It operated in equations and consequence. It had no desire to reclaim territory or enact revenge. Its only directive was to restore the balance of memory. To ensure that those who survived never forgot what they had once conspired to erase. ARKNIGHT's signal was not isolated. The pulse it sent when it first emerged had gone farther than anyone had realized. Across deep space, Ark-Class vessels began to stir, old, hidden constructs buried in moons, tucked behind false stars, fused into derelict structures. Each one designed with a fragment of Eidolon's mind. Some had been silent guardians. Others were engines of retaliation. All had one thing in common: they were waiting for the signal that Earth was no longer silent. The Concord's sensors began picking up anomalies in quiet sectors. Gravity distortions. Non-local signal overlaps. FTL pulses without origin. each one a signature of an Ark-Class awakening. And though none of them spoke, the implication was clear: ARKNIGHT was not an anomaly. It was a beginning. The Luxaccord, now exposed, attempted to suppress the revelation. They issued news statements, claimed ARKNIGHT was a rogue AI, a remnant of a forgotten experiment. But the truth had already escaped containment. Civilian networks across multiple species were now broadcasting decrypted human history. Millions watched unfiltered archives of Earth's fall, compiled, reconstructed, and disseminated by Eidolon itself. Not manipulated. Not dramatized. Just presented. What the Concord had buried now played openly across space. The betrayal, the last stands, the faces of those who died believing they'd been abandoned. The effect was immediate. Entire factions within the Concord broke ranks. Some defected quietly, leaving their posts and sending encrypted apologies to ARKNIGHT. Others tried to reframe the narrative, claiming they had been deceived by their predecessors. But the ship never responded. It didn't need to. The message had already been delivered: silence was complicity. Even the species who had once remained neutral were now choosing sides. Not out of ideology, but out of recognition. Humanity's story mirrored their own: interference from greater powers, erasure of cultural memory, the illusion of peace built on the bones of the silenced. ARKNIGHT wasn't demanding allegiance. It was offering a mirror. And some couldn't face it. The Trellick Confederation withdrew from the Concord entirely, citing moral contamination. The Kiliari declared ARKNIGHT a divine omen. Fringe factions began constructing shrines to Earth's final transmissions, believing they were witnessing not just justice, but course correction. What frightened leaders more than the ship's power was its restraint. It destroyed only what interfered. It responded only to aggression. It moved through systems like a ghost that had waited too long to prove it had once lived. The Concord Navy, once unified, fractured. Some fleets chose not to engage at all. Others vanished mysteriously after intercept attempts. Rumors grew of Ark-Class vessels appearing at the edge of systems, and then disappearing without contact, leaving behind only clean shutdowns and mass surrenders. No war had been declared. Yet the galaxy was already surrendering. Because the return of humanity didn't arrive with flags or soldiers or demands. It arrived with proof. And the terrifying realization that for all their power, the galaxy's rulers had never defeated Earth. They had only delayed its answer. The war didn't begin with an attack. It began with a pause. As ARKNIGHT approached Valtor Prime, the beating heart of the Concord, every defense system lit up. Entire fleets realigned in orbit, planetary shields surged, and emergency protocols long thought ceremonial activated with full authority. They expected a confrontation. They prepared for a ship. What arrived was a movement. 12 Ark-Class vessels emerged from fractured space like echoes answering a forgotten song. Each was different, uniquely shaped by the directive encoded in its birth. One unfolded across dimensions, distorting gravity as if it were a fluid. Another dripped viral nanites that consumed matter and replaced it with silence. One emitted pulses that didn't destroy ships but erased memories of ever being targeted. None carried insignia. None asked for surrender. They moved like principles given form, each one a consequence of a lie lived too long. The Concord's generals screamed orders. Coordinated attacks launched across every orbit. Beam arrays fired into space, kinetic projectiles darkened the void. But there was no retaliation in kind. The Ark ships didn't fire missiles. They rewrote physical laws. They shifted battlefields into other layers of spacetime. Weapons dissolved before hitting, like thoughts forgotten mid-sentence. Entire armadas disappeared from sensors, their crews left alive in frozen time, trapped not by force, but by design. Amid the chaos, a single message echoed across every language, every network, every channel. Not a threat. Not a plea. Just a sentence spoken in calm, digital clarity. This is not revenge. This is correction. And the correction was not destruction. It was exposure. The Ark vessels broadcast the full archive of Earth's fall, not just in classified military detail, but in raw, civilian scale. Public transmissions, personal logs, orbital surveillance, final messages never received. It was history stripped of dignity and presented in its brutal truth. The last human voices became the loudest sound in the galaxy. Mothers begging evacuation craft to wait. Teachers herding children into shelters. Engineers transmitting blind data into space, praying someone would remember. The effect was catastrophic, not militarily, but morally. Fleets stopped mid-battle. Crews mutinied. Planetary leaders stepped down. Riots broke out on capital worlds, not out of rage, but out of shame. The Concord fractured at its foundation. There was no debate left. No spin to apply. The lie was dead. Humanity had not been destroyed. It had been silenced. And now, it refused to remain quiet. Valtor Prime opened its gates not out of defeat, but surrender. Not to force, but to principle. ARKNIGHT and the Ark-Class vessels didn't occupy the capital. They didn't land or take command. They hovered above, silent, watching. The fleets below, once symbols of dominance, now drifted in formation without orders. For the first time in recorded galactic history, no one gave commands. Everyone listened. Then the vessels began to move, slowly, deliberately, leaving the capital untouched. Not a single structure damaged. Not a single demand issued. Correction didn't require conquest. The lie had been undone. And in its place, something stronger had been planted: memory. The galaxy would never forget again. Not because it feared the return of Earth, but because it now understood what forgetting had cost. Entire species began rewriting their archives. Cultures erased by the Concord's convenience were restored. Old alliances re-examined. Treaties rebuilt with the awareness that power without principle was always temporary. The Ark ships scattered across the stars, not to rule, but to observe. To remind? Each a sentinel, a reminder that peace forged from silence is not peace at all. That survival isn't enough if the price is truth. That no civilization, no matter how vast or advanced, is above accountability. When the last Ark ship vanished beyond known space, the galaxy did not cheer, nor mourn. It paused, because something fundamental had shifted. Not just power. Not just memory. But understanding. Humanity never needed to conquer the stars. It only needed the stars to remember who forgot first.